Chair. Ministers, thank you for being here today, and thank you to all of the other members on the panel for being here today. Section 21, 22, and 23 operates to allow any project to be exempt from this legislation. Mr. Bassam-Duval suggested that this legislation was similar to the Emergencies Act. I'm seeking some clarity on your answer, Minister LeBlanc, regarding because notwithstanding the validity of a law, Section 21, 22, and 23 of Bill C-5 allows a project to be exempt from the legislation. And we have seen sweeping powers in the notwithstanding clause in Section 33 of the Constitution that allows the suspension of liberties, but there is a provision that protects citizens under Section 1, which is the reasonable limits. Where's the reasonable limits of this legislation? Where's the breaks in this legislation so that federal governments don't become bullies and sweep into municipal and provincial jurisdiction like they did with Bill C-69?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, Dr. Lewis, thank you for the question. I think it's important. The reason the government has put this bill before Parliament is precisely to enable large projects in the national interest to be built. I think that the context and the purpose of the legislation, there's part one, which speaks about free trade within Canada. The part with respect to major projects focuses on enabling, and this is enabling legislation that creates a framework for these projects to be advanced. So, and any, people often refer to the clauses, Dr. Lewis, that you properly raised. Any exercise of authority in that context has to be done with respect to the purpose of the legislation. So if the purpose of the legislation is to enable these large projects to be built, you can imagine a series of statutes that may form part of that evaluation, and then it's exercised by the governor and council, which is not an unusual process.
My question specifically, though, doesn't deal with the enabling aspect of the legislation. We know what the legislation is about, but my question is specifically, what do you, Minister, see as reasonable limits on these sweeping powers that allow the invalidation of laws pursuant to Section 21, 22, and 23 of Bill C-5? Where are the reasonable limits? What do you see as reasonable limits? And why aren't they contained in this bill?
Well, so again, the reasonable, I think it's important, first of all, to put it in context. These decisions will be exercised in consultation with provincial and territorial leaders. The proponents of the projects, I'm encouraged by premiers working together to create, for example, energy corridors. The proponents in many cases may be sovereign provincial and territorial governments with Indigenous partners. So that is a limitation. That is a limitation in and of itself. We'll be designating projects that have gone through the scrutiny of other orders of government, for example.
But Minister, yesterday we heard concerns from a number of stakeholders and constitutional experts who confirmed that this bill is vague, has been hastily written, and leaves much uncertainty with respect to projects of national interest. In fact, that determination, it was concluded that determination would be solely a political decision, which, given these provisions in Section 21 and 22, leaves room for political abuse. And my question, I'm turning back to the question, is where are the breaks in this legislation, and why are there no reasonable limits put in this legislation so that this government can evoke the confidence of the people?
Dr. Lewis, if I may, seeking to understand the roots of your concern, I guess I'd like to understand whether you are concerned that as a result of this legislation, we will build too much.
What the hell is even that?
Whether as a result of this legislation, we will get too many major projects built.
Excuse me. I think that is actually a very pejorative way of characterizing my concern. And Canadians are concerned, and I don't want you to minimize Canadians' concern about building too much. That's very facetious and it's unnecessary. We're trying to help, and we had witnesses yesterday that were very concerned about the civil liberty, about the liberties that will be suspended in this legislation, and you're making a joke out of it. It's not funny.
No,
it is not funny.
No, truly, I was in no way making a joke. I was being entirely serious. This legislation is being proposed by us, and I believe it is being supported by the Conservatives, because there is a national consensus, which I believe many Conservative MPs agree with, that we have come to a place in Canada where we have such a thicket of processes and rules and regulations at all levels of government.
What would you say you do here?
That we are unable to build with the alacrity that this moment in time requires. This legislation addresses precisely that realization, and that's why it creates a clear framework to consider and put forward projects of national interest. There's going to be great transparency in terms of which are the projects being put forward. There is a specified list of the areas where the legislation may need to move with more alacrity. And I'm very sympathetic, as I believe my colleagues are, to concerns around protecting due process, protecting the rights of Canadians. Absolutely.
Thank you.
No!